one of the aha moments was that we will never gonna win this race against them. They will always be one step ahead of us.
Today we're delving into artificial intelligence. It's been a few years now that we've been talking about this phenomenon. Is it time to hand over the keys, the steering wheel, the engine, and decisions to the proverbial Skynet? Excuse the Terminator 2 reference. Well, listeners, helping me get into this topic is Eyal Benishti, the pioneer of AI-driven email security and founder and CEO of Series C funded and most badass logoed email security company, Ironscales. Born and raised in Israel, Eyal was always into technology and coding from a very young age, in fact, the age of 7. So for all of you out there thinking about whether it's time to get your children into coding, here is the embodiment of what that means. Now, Eyal's dad bought him a book in basic coding, and he spent most of his free time at a computer shop around the corner, and then indoors during the time that they needed to be indoors in Israel in those days, coding. And then he went on to build computers, and including an Amstrad, starting on black and white screens, building up through his Pentium, various Pentium machines, floppy disks, CD-ROMs, hard drives. I'm sure many listeners out there have had a very similar path. Now, army service for 4 years, Eyal?
Almost, yeah.
Almost 4 years of army service, which of course is a requirement in Israel. Everyone does national service of some kind. Before you bounced into a BSc in computer science and then took on your first job as a Java developer. Now, various jobs in the tech industry before ending up at Radware. Radware, a very well-known cybersecurity company globally. And it was at Radware that you conceived Ironscales as a concept, as an idea. And what I'd love to do now is to talk a little bit about that. But I think in order to give it credence, what we need to do for our listeners is just wind back a bit, because email is something that we all use and love and work with every single day. In fact, email security for those that work in the IT industry is probably second nature. But as we were chatting about the other day, you have to go back to basics when you have new starters at Ironscales, because you don't want to assume that they know. So let's help our listeners. Let's step back through email security and tell us a bit about that.
Sure. So it's funny to say email security, because email was not created secured by design. It's a text-based protocol. Everyone can open a notepad and basically write the email, and then ask any server out there to send the email on his behalf. So one of the first protocols over the internet. So no one really thought about how to secure things back then. It was mostly designed to allow people to send an electronic message to each other, and it wasn't before basically spam was introduced to the world when people started to think seriously about, okay, how are we going to secure this medium? How are we going to make sure that messages that are being sent from one to another are secure in nature? And this is how it started. Basically, spam filters were the first email security solution.
And what sort of roughly what decade are we in at that point?
Talking about the 80s.
Yeah,
the early 80s.
It was spam as early as the 80s. Yeah. Wow. Fantastic. So if we're thinking about stopping, at that point it was just inconvenient stuff. It wasn't necessarily malicious. It was just rubbish. Like we get mail through the door that we don't want, the latest pizza menu and so on and so forth. We were getting that sort of stuff, but just flooding through electronic communications, right? And then email starts to step up a gear through the 90s into the noughties. Everyone's on email. When did you start first seeing not you personally, but when did we first start seeing the malware as we know it today starting to come through email?
So the next step after spam, the kind of basically threat that were introduced by threat actors is obviously malware. And since email as a protocol evolved, and sending files and not just text and stuff like that were available via email. Obviously, since we all know that email is the main gateway to the company, threat actors were starting to use malicious attachments, and email was the vehicle. The attachments obviously was the payload, and then there was the point in time when spam filters started to kind of think about, okay, we have a new issue that we need to deal with. Like, malware is something that we solve with antiviruses and normally thought about, malware protection.
So let's just pause there for a second. So let's talk about antivirus. We can't assume that everybody really understands that concept because it's moved on. So what we're talking about is code that's written in a certain way. And then we talk about signature based because we look at code as a signature. And therefore, if we know that signature, just like my signature is different to yours, you can stop me because you can see me. And therefore, if I match a blocking code that matches that signature, I can stop it.
Exactly.
And email at that point, email malware was basically just email delivered and viruses.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So viruses were delivered via email. And like you said, we used kind of signature-based solution like AV, but not only in order to stop malware. And that was the point where spam filter became what we call today secure email gateways, because now it's not just about spam filtering. It's about, hey, how do we stop the bad stuff, or how we secure the environment against.
And the concept of a secure email gateway is just like any gateway. I'm going to put this in front of my house and someone's going to have to open the door and we have to let only people through that we want. We're putting bouncers on the door. And that's what the SEG, I'm going to put that acronym out there because as the listeners know, if we can use an acronym, it's okay, as long as we tell them what it is. So secure email gateway, or a SEG, is the gatekeeper, and it filters everything as it comes through the gate.
And if you remember, I know that it seems like a long time ago, but before we had the cloud, before we were kind of, installing and hosting stuff on somebody else's computer, companies were actually having their own data centers. Their email servers were installed there, and the SEGs and all the other kind of servers and stuff that they.
And that's it. And we had a perimeter then, didn't we? I mean, the network was inside a building behind cables and.
Exactly.
So it was easy to put that sort of thing.
And the concept was pretty simple. Like, as long as you're inside the perimeter, which means you're working in office, there is something that can protect.
And the concept of remote working at that point really wasn't a thing, right?
Wasn't really a thing back then.
So we're stepping through, right? So that's I think a good basis for email, and really that approach to email has been going on for 2 decades. Secure email gateways approach.
Yeah, obviously they evolved, with the threat, and as defenders we developed new technologies like sandbox solution, like that FireEye introduced back in the days, and the whole concept was, and I will explain.
Tell us about sandboxing.
So the idea behind sandboxing, obviously, using signatures in order to stop malware was good until it wasn't. And it wasn't when, obviously the bad guys know that we're looking for signatures, so they were finding some neat ways to basically hide or change the code in a dynamic, neat way. Sometimes they were just distributing the same malware, but in a polymorphic way, which means they created new ways.
Polymorphic meaning lots of different ways at once.
A lot of different ways.
Very quickly changing,
For example, if you want to get from 1 to 5, you can make it in different ways. You can add 4, you can add 1, and then add 3. So they were trying to kind of pull all these kinds of tricks and shticks in order to full signature-based solution. So the idea was that, hey, let's take this attachment and let's detonate it, or let's run it in a sandbox environment, in a virtual, and sometimes even physical environment. We can talk about
so the concept of sandboxing is actually letting the malware do its thing, but away from the corporate network.
And observe, just see what it's doing. Is it writing something to the disk? Is it writing something to the memory? Is there any network connection? Because normally malware is speaking with some command and control server, either to send data or wait for.
And I'm thinking here, it's probably a good point to point out that when we're talking about the gateway and the perimeter and so forth, we used to deploy secure email gateways on appliances or on software on servers inside the perimeter. And then Message Labs was born, and Mimecast. And what we were talking about then is extracting, pushing email, all that sandboxing concept outside of the perimeter, somewhere that's wholly secure, and then delivering only clean email into, and that's an important concept, right? Because where we're going to get to talking about Ironscales, similar concept, away from the perimeter, we're not running it inside. After all, why let someone in the gate when you can filter them miles outside of it?
And especially when you're looking for a threat, known threat, because at the end of the day, signature-based detection and even sandbox dynamic kind of scanning-based solutions, they're looking for known patterns, okay? I'm looking for a certain kind of piece of code, or I'm looking for the the program to act in a specific way that I can signature at the end of the day. I'm just signaturing behavior and execution. I'm not signaturing the actual code, the binary code. And as you can imagine, like again, it's that cat and mouse kind of thing. When the threat actors understood that we are running things in virtual environments, they just created a more sophisticated malware that can bypass dynamic scanning.
So this, I think, is a good point to pause. So let's wind the clock back 8 years. Eyal's sat at Radware. He's obviously living and dreaming and thinking about email security. I'm joking. I have no idea what you were thinking about. But you were a security researcher at that point, an analyst. So what happened in your work? What were you observing that made you sit there and think, my goodness, I've got to do something about this, and actually I can see where this is going. And then actually I'm going to ask you to talk a bit about how the threat actors have changed the way that they're attacking us, and how all that led to the conception of Ironscales as a concept. So let's go back. You sat in Radware. It's 8 years ago.
So I sit in Radware. I'm reversing. For the people that don't know, Radware was doing the part in Radware that I was helping was helping to companies to stop DDoS attacks.
And let's bring that back to Hollywood. Let's go Hollywood again, because this is like watching The Matrix, right? This is you're watching the internet, stuff that's coming through, flowing through. So sorry, back to you.
So obviously, in order to kind of launch this kind of distributed denial of service attacks, threat actors are using multiple bots. Like, they're trying to install as many bots as they can in order to try and flood the gates to the point that.
And then let's just go into bot again. So a bot is a machine that has been compromised and now is being used as computing power. It's to drive a more
piece of software, kind of like, it's a computer virus or a Trojan, whatever you want to call it, that is sitting there and waiting for a signal from, again, the command and control to say, now it's the time to flood, and this is the IP that you need to flood. Okay. Yeah. And obviously the point is to kind of block legitimate traffic for the sites. And again, as part of the reversing, it's a fascinating world, because you keep kind of seeing how these guys know what exactly we are doing and how they're working, and they're very clever and very sophisticated in order to bypass everything that we are doing and avoid detection. So now spending many hours reversing, reading assembly code, trying to figure out, okay, what vulnerability are they exploiting, how the exploit looks like, how they stay persistent, how they communicate with command and control, how they are hiding or trying to basically disguise the command and control traffic with different kind of cover channels in order to go undetected. So it's a fascinating world because they're always challenging us with some new stuff. And this is basically was the aha moment. One of the aha moments was that we will never gonna win this race against them. They will always be one step ahead of us.
And is that the realization you had?
Yeah. They know what we are doing. They can test it against our solution. They can install whatever they want.
Yeah.
We'll talk about the cloud and some built-in.
Can I also ask you a personal question? How did that, as someone who has committed your life and career to that point of blocking this stuff, how did it make you feel, like emotionally? Did you have an emotional reaction to that feeling of? Was it an overwhelming feeling? Was it a determination that you think you could come up with a way of stopping it?
Determination. Obviously, I was enjoying the challenge. Yeah. I like to solve hard problems. I like puzzles. Yeah. At the end of the day, it's like solving a puzzle with 1,000 pieces.
Yeah.
Because it's pretty complicated. But at some point that there is some kind of frustration, because you're saying, okay, this is going on and on and on and on and on, and there must be a different way to kind of tackle this issue. And at the same time, another trend started. Now we know that. Now we call it in a name, and now we have a name for it. It's a business email compromise. But we've seen that email at some point was a vehicle not just to deliver a malware or a bad link inside the organization. They were delivering emails with what we call today bad intent. So they're not necessarily trying to compromise the endpoint. They're not trying to install a bot on your machine. What they are trying to do is they're trying to make you something that you're not supposed to do. And I like to call it, they're trying to hack the business process. Okay. They want you to pay an invoice, which is fake. They want you to wire money. They're impersonating to the company's CEO or the company's CFO, and they're doing all these kind of things. And they've learned how to monetize basically without installing malware on your endpoint. And crypto obviously had a lot of contribution to that at some point as well, because
cryptocurrency,
because the payment
or suddenly money is now the same thing as everything else. It's data on a
anonymous, like they don't need to do any any complicated money muling kinds of
There was that fascinating Twitter compromise, wasn't there, when someone hacked the top 20 and sent out this wire me some money. Anyway, we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves with Twitter and that. But so we're coming back. It's 8 years ago. You're having this realization that you've got to change the game. What happened? What made Eyal step out of probably a quite comfortable job, an exciting job in Radware, and go and establish another email security company?
So funny enough, it was thanks to the fact that friends and colleagues that knew that I'm reversing for a living, they kind of used to forward me emails asking, hey, is this email legit? Is that and I was answering back and basically helping them understand what are the kind of hints that I'm looking at, or how I'm kind of investigating an email in order to kind of try and determine its authenticity. And the thing that really shocked me, that at some point the guesswork stopped.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like, hey, what do you think? Is this legit or not? I was getting emails like, hey, check out this cool phishing emails. And for me, it was like, oh, I was just able to teach laymen, people normal people that security is not their job, how to spot a fish.
Yeah.
And since I know that the technical controls, the segs and all the kind of fancy technology that we are trying to put in front of the servers in order to protect our users will always fail, the idea was, hey, let's create a second layer. Or let's use users and the real-time threat intelligence that they can provide to us in order to build something that is stronger, that is better.
But that's as well as the other technology, right? It's not as instead of. You're saying I just want to labour the point. It's an additional layer, and what you're doing is you're basically crowdsourcing greater intelligence by teaching people what to look for. And I think what I want to say for our listeners here, because I want to make sure everyone just kind of stays with us. Ironscales is combining a number of different technologies and techniques to do one thing and one thing only, which is create greater context. And context in security in 2022 and going on into 2023 and beyond is the single most important thing in security, because it is so sophisticated. It is, if you spend too long thinking about it like we do, it's actually quite scary. For you, it's probably just a more exciting challenge. But the greater context we can build, the more chance we have of stopping this stuff, because the defenses that we've been describing up to this point simply can't cope. Yeah. How many, you gave me a stat the other day on phishing. How many are we seeing a day?
About 4 million new phishing emails a day. Unique, yeah. So back then, it really required CISOs, chief information security officers and security experts, to kind of change their mindset, because cybersecurity was all about prevention. How do I prevent the breach? How do I prevent the phish? And we basically, when we started Ironscales, we went to them and we say, hey guys, assume the breach. Assume the phish. Phishing will land in your employees.
That's an important mindset change, isn't it?
Very, very different. Because remember, back in the days, firewalls and intrusion detection system and AVs, they were all designed for one thing: prevention. We need to prevent, detect, and stop immediately the threat. And we said, no, you need to assume, try and prevent as much as you can, but assume that you are going to be breached. Mm-hmm. When you are going to be breached or phished, in our case, the last line of your defense are your users. And now we believe that we find a neat way to kind of utilize them, leverage, empower them to help you and provide you this kind of real-time intelligence, saying, hey, I got something in my inbox that I don't think that should be here. Our technical control failed. And this is how we started, basically, giving people not just the knowledge, but the tool and kind of this mindset of, hey, you're part of the solution. Because back then, most of the CISOs were kind of working under the assumption that users are the problem. Mm-hmm. They are the one that need to be
it's so true. It's a traditional IT mindset. Oh, we hate users. And I can even picture an IT manager I worked under years ago, just didn't like anybody.
They're the problem. They're the troublemakers at the end of the day. And we said, no, we have to stop thinking like that. And we need to understand that they can actually help if we just be honest with them and tell them, hey guys, we need you to be part of what we are doing here and part of protecting the organization. And we launched a first version of this, and it was a great success because, we got some CISOs coming back to us and say, guess what? One of our users reported a real fish that could have harmed the organization, and we were able to stop it.
An average user, an average employee stopped something that could have totally compromised the company.
No, normally it's the most savvy employees out there. It's the people that they know how to detect the fish, the scam, and they care enough about it to report.
And I think that's an important point, right? Because I think any IT professional listening to this will probably look at it with a dose of cynicism, right? Most users don't care. They just don't. But actually, if you could just take 10% of the employee base across the world and get them that empowered and empower them to be part of it, you've suddenly magnified the cybersecurity minds around the world.
You're using your top 10 to protect the other 90%.
Yeah.
Okay. Why? Because they are quicker and they care, and now they're equipped with the right tools in order to do that. And the results, the numbers are telling a very good story.
So we got this traditional stuff. We're keeping that. We've built in a community of people that have now got sharp, honed, skilled minds that are now joining the IT function to try and stop stuff. Is that it? Did we do anything else at Ironscales? Have you harnessed any other cool technology that's going to kind of build into this?
So I always like to say that actually by doing that, we created a new problem. Because when you have smart people that care about security and you give them a button, they will report with the button, and then the security team was overwhelmed. And they're telling us, okay, so you're showing us that we have a problem, like you're surfacing the problem, but you're not fixing it for us. It's more noise.
It's like monitoring systems. Like you put it up and you get some alerts. I have a wireless security camera system at home. If I leave it on and don't turn it off, as happened the other day, and I pick up my phone, I've got 75 alerts because the kids have been walking in and out the front door and through the front room and stuff. I generally just don't look at any of it. If I'd had a burglar in that point, I would have missed all of it. So anyway, it's a great point, right?
And we told them, you're right. And we went back to the drawing board, and this is where we basically invented what Gartner now calls MSOR, Messaging, Security, Orchestration, Automation, and Response. Okay. And the idea was to basically automatically investigate and collect all the forensics for every email that is being reported by users and try and come with an automated verdict or determination whether this email should stay or go. So it started very naive, like every first MVP, minimal viable product, every first kind of release.
And this is how many years ago, by the way, just to give a bit of context?
It was 2015 when we released the first version of the MSOR.
Okay, so that's 7 years ago.
Yeah. But it worked. It was good enough back then to give them what they need in order to kind of handle the flood. And this is where for the first time we started to think about, okay, there is this kind of new cool thing that is now more achievable that called machine learning and AI. And we have not just eyeballs, not just user clicking on a button, but now we have hundreds. Back then it was dozens and then hundreds, and now we have more than 20,000 of security professionals that are basically looking after what is being reported, looking at the investigation results and saying, yes, this is a fish. Just they click on a button and say, yes, it's a fish, so we go and do our thing and pulling it back from the mailboxes, or they say, you know what, this is actually a spam.
Yeah.
Oh no, the user is wrong. This is a safe email. And we said, we are seeing all this kind of decision being made in real time. Again, this is valuable information. This is valuable intelligence now coming not from the laymen, coming from security professionals. Let's take all this information, the crowd-sourced intelligence, and let's start about thinking models, building models on top of them that basically mimic their decision-making process. Yeah. Okay. So when something is being reported, our ML will be able to look at it and try and predict what the security experts will say about these emails. And we just started by putting a banner, when something was reported and was not automatically classified or resolved by the system, we placed a banner for the admin and we told him, our AI thinks that it's 80% phishing. And And they loved it. They loved it to the point that they say, if it's 80% phishing, just don't wait for us. Just go ahead and do something.
That's interesting. So this is all like building up, isn't it? So using artificial intelligence and machine learning to provide calculations to essentially provide either a recommendation, and now you've got your analyst repeating back and saying, actually, I'm happy if your recommendation hits an 80% threshold. Just make a decision on my behalf. If it's not, we can go back and get it.
It's like the driver assistant that is helping me to stay in the lane.
Yeah, and that's great, right? I don't want my car to drive. It's not replacing me.
Yeah, it's not, I'm still driving, but it's really helping me, to get from A to B. Yeah. So we did the same thing for the security team. We tell them, hey, we still need your kind of your hands on the steering wheel, but we have some AI, and we call her Themis, by the way. She's the lady of good counsel from the Greek methodology. We have this kind of 24/7. She doesn't drink coffee. She doesn't she's not taking any vacations, and she will help to drive most of the decision. And she will call you only when she needs human help. And by the way, she will learn from it. Every time that you or somebody else in our community is making a decision, she's becoming smarter and smarter all the time.
So we've got a great piece of technology now that started from a crowdsourcing community basis, harnessing intelligent people. You've now built some very clever technology, which you've called Themis, and that's artificial intelligence, machine learning combined to help provide better decisions. Is that the end of the story?
No, it wasn't enough.
Oh no. But we're stepping through the years now, right? So, and I think this is an important point because I've heard artificial intelligence and automation thrown around for so many years now. I've seen some companies out there that are basically trying to convince me that it's time to let the Teslas drive out on their own around the cities. And frankly, I think it's terrifying that we think it's a great idea to hand the keys over to the machines when actually the machines are not perfect. You describe the 80% threshold. What if they make a mistake? And so I'm kind of teeing you up here to just step us in. What happens next?
I think the key point to understand about machine learning and AI that the models that we are developing are just as good as the data that we feed into them.
Of course.
And we talked about the 4 million new instances every day. There is no way you can feed that amount of data fast enough to the machine just by building a big kind of research team, which what vendors are doing normally. They hire researchers, they hire analysts, they hire a small army of people that all their job is to kind of chase. And then we're back to the original days where we were chasing threats. And we said, okay, so we have this kind of neat, we call it the post-delivery, what can we do when the email was already delivered? But when we looked at the data and we looked about phishing emails that were, again, going through the SEC, the technical controls undetected, landing in users' mailboxes, and again, going undetected, we realized that these emails, in most cases, are coming from someone or something that they already know.
Yeah.
And we kind of scratched our heads. Okay, what can we do more? What can we do different? And it was back in 2016. And then we basically decided that in order to protect users, we need to know the users. In order to protect organizations, we need to know the organizations. So we developed what we called back then a mailbox level, not a server level, not a gateway level, but a mailbox level email security technology that all its job was to get to know you, your communication patterns, your social graph, your style, and be able to flag anomalies and saying, hey, this email is not coming from Lance because we know Lance, we know how he's sending emails. This is someone kind of pretending to be Lance, or in our kind of jargon, is impersonating Lance. And that was the next kind of generation that really allowed us to deal with intent-based attack and not necessarily threat-based attack, and a real chance to stay ahead of the curve and not be reactive, but be more proactive in a way that we're learning, we're taking a proactive kinds of approach to learn, profile, and then look for things that...
So it's like you're getting towards the ultimate context here. You're not just saying generic context. I'm still trying to identify the malware actors because actually I can't, because they're changing all the time. But what I can do is I can learn you, your organization, and your people, and I can give you organizational specific context to determine whether this thing is one of you or not.
Even if someone is sending you a malware, okay, over email, like he needs to convince you to open this file.
Yeah.
He needs to run some kind of a social engineer scam in order to...
Which is easy, right? Because we're all living out there on the digital... There's stuff that even if we hide our profiles, there's still some stuff out there on us.
So with a solution that is more intent-based and contextual-based, at some point, we said, like, yes, we will scan the links in the attachment, but honestly, we don't really care about the attachment.
Yeah.
I want to know what this person is trying to achieve, because when you think about it, at the end of the day, with messaging and email security, it's all about answering a question, who is sending what? Mm-hmm. So maybe I'm not sure about the what, because I can't scan it, or because it's a 0-day, or they created a new version, but I can collect a lot of information about the who, and does this who makes us in the context of your mailbox, and by that, and we've showed it again and again and again, we can basically send the file back to one of the threat intel or anti-malware vendors and tell them, we don't know how and why, but this file is malicious. Yeah. It comes clean from the scan, but this file is malicious because the intent is malicious, the context is malicious, so the file must be malicious. So it's kind of a way to detect 0 days, like things that were never known before.
And you're doing this effectively, right? And I think the fascinating thing about Ironscales, who I think is still a relatively well-known but unknown brand in the context of the world, thinking about all the email gateways protecting millions of organizations out there. How many customers do you have globally, organizations?
We have more than 7,000 customers.
So I think that's staggering. And yet you built that up, and every time a customer wants to engage and listen and learn, it's so compelling, and not like at a sales level, but just at the same way I feel. I go back to my emotional response to Ironscales was nothing to do with business. It was all to do with, actually, you make me feel more safe because of what you're talking about. And it's not just a nice marketing slide that says, I'm going to do this. You're actually doing it. And a lot of your customers have been acquired through word of mouth, recommendations, and you do a great proof point, which is so important, demonstrate how the technology works.
When you think about it, what we're really building here is a community.
Yeah.
Yes, we give them a technology to work with, we give them a tool, but it's the community, and every customer that joins the platform makes this platform better. Yeah. Stronger, because now he is actively contributing to the system. Because when you think about it, the way it's being kind of structured, we have the ML AI layer that is designed to stop 99% of the attacks, but we know that will fail eventually. Yeah. And then we have the human and the analyst and the crowd layer.
Yes, you have. So that's important, right? We haven't talked about that. So you have, we're stepping up through the layers. You've got the traditional defenses, you've layered in the crowdsourcing, community-based click, I'm reporting something. You built in the AI, ML, machine-driven decision-making and recommendations, and then you step in your own analysts to say, these are the experts that deal with the what percent, do you think?
The 1% that is bypassing the traditional and non-traditional kind of layers that we put.
And does that bring us up to current? So Ironscales has layered all those things in together. Is there anything that we've not talked about that is kind of layering into this kind of new generation of?
So we're layering everything together. Obviously, we added some more stuff like, how can we detect that account was already compromised and is being used to phish others. Now we are looking into since COVID, the perimeter was scattered. People are working remotely. They're using more collaboration tools. It's a new way of communication. Most companies, they're open for guest users as well. We know that it's the number one. You mentioned Twitter is another, but we know that it's the number one tool now for what we call the lateral movement. So if they compromise one account, and if they want to find a way to a more privileged account, they're using collaboration tools to do that. So now all of a sudden, it's not just about what's coming outside of the organization, but what's going on inside the organization that we need to monitor and look for bad intent. Again, it's all back to being able to detect anomalies and.
Because that's right. Because now you've got what you've got. The application of it can actually go broader.
Exactly.
Can we start looking at, rather than just stuff coming in, can we now start look at stuff going out? And I think it's a brilliant evolution of the technology, and it's it's so important for cybersecurity because of the way the threats have changed.
Especially now that the cloud is a big thing and everything has an API, so you can easily connect into stuff. You don't need to be a blocking solution like traditionally. Emails were going to the servers being scrubbed and only that. So you can really connect via API. You have more data points. And again, we're talking about machine learning and AI. One thing that machine learning and AI loves is data.
Yeah.
Data. Give me as much data as you can. Let's model it. Let's build some models around it, and it makes it just better, more accurate than reducing false positive rates and all the things that companies obviously.
Fascinating. What we need to do is because you're into your 8th year at the moment as a business. Progress. You're I think at a point of morphing. New people coming in, new leadership, growing the team, expanding the your kind of breadth and reach. Because really, I think when we look at what Ironscales stands for, it stands for a fundamental change that needs to happen in the approach to securing not just email, because of course we're talking about messaging. Throw into the mix, the proliferation of Slack and Teams and all the other messaging platforms that have really started to roll out, and you guys are focusing on that now as well, helping to look at how we secure those sort of messaging channels, because it's, I presume, similar sort of concepts that you need to secure that.
It's a message. It's someone sending something to someone that we need to kind of help it determine whether it's legit or not. And yes, it's a big challenge. Obviously, we're disrupting an old legacy kind of market where, like we said.
Hey, as my listeners know, I talk about the comfy sofa in the corner, right? And your email gateway sits alongside your web gateway. It's something you've always had. It's the way you've always done it. And you sit there and you scratch your head because you've spent a small fortune on cyber training and awareness, which we haven't talked about because, of course, you guys do that as well. Or you bring that into the fold. The testing and awareness side, the industry, the global economy has spent an absolute fortune. And yet we have seen the highest rate of infection via phishing in the past 12 months than we ever have done. So our rate of spending is doing nothing to slow because on its own, of course, it's not a solution. Raising awareness is good. And of course, what you guys are doing is providing the same sort of learning platforms. You have some good technology partners that specialize in that, but then you're driving those scores and tests back into the platform to generate more context. What are these people doing in simulated versions? And how does that affect how we should treat and learn and understand those people?
Exactly. And it's not just that the trend landscape has changed. You see a real shift, or you see phishing moving downstream. Phishing used to be an enterprise problem. Mm-hmm. But now every medium and even small or micro company, they're being phished. Because again, we mentioned that the threat actors, they found new way to monetize. So it's no longer I don't really need to infect an endpoint in an enterprise organization to make money. I can make money on the small organizations as well, and especially now that everyone is in the cloud. So it really created a big problem where now we know for a fact that micro, small, and medium businesses, they need an enterprise-grade solution to protect their environment. And they're not in the crossfire; they are a target.
Yeah. So right, I think we should probably start to head towards wrapping up. So I think my mind is. I've been convinced on what you guys are doing, and for me, it's bigger than business. It's about, again, fundamental shift in what needs to happen. I think I receive more phishing emails in my personal life than I do at work. I think the threat actors know that I'm probably an easier target through my Gmail account or whatever I might be using, Facebook, whatever. How is that consumer world featuring in your mind? Is that something you're thinking about as an organization now, how you kind of draw in some of that stuff, or is that still outside? And it's okay. I know it's not a question, not something we've talked about before, but it's just how do we start to secure that?
So it was always there, and to be honest, currently people are mostly relying on the Googles and the Hotmails of the world, like the Microsoft, back to this to kind of secure their personal email. It's important to understand that it's a different type of phishing. Okay, sometimes we see the same type of phishing, but again, now because we are dealing mostly with business email compromise, which is a huge problem. It's causing more damage than ransomware these days. this is where we decided to focus as a company, as a business. Hopefully, maybe one day we'll be able to bring an enterprise solution to a consumer. I think they deserve it. I think we'll get there one day, but we are now heads down helping organizations to protect their environment.
And that's, for me, that's more than enough. So I think as we kind of head towards the end of this episode, we've talked about so many important concepts, how you're using artificial intelligence. What I love the most is that you're kind of refreshing on so many levels to hear that you're not thinking AI is the answer, but it's definitely part of it because, of course, computers can compute mathematical things much faster than the human brain can, or an individual human brain can. You're harnessing that as a collective. You're harnessing the community to create another collective. You're driving all this together, and then you're applying a very highly experienced SOC team that work at Ironscales, because you can't get away from that 1%. You need maybe some human eyes on it. And of course, you're growing and growing as an organization. So it's a fascinating journey. I'm very happy that we at Distology are part of that. Very excited about how we can help that to proliferate. Distology, we're very big on education. Educate first, sell second. And if we can sell through it because we're helping, then we're doing the right thing. And I feel we're very matched on that. And everyone I've met from Ironscales is very similar. You really want to get the awareness raised. You want to get the technology out there because it really does fundamentally help. So there we go.
And congrats are in place for yesterday winning the best distributor at the CRN Awards. So congratulations for that.
But by the time this episode goes out, that might be old news. But I really, really thank you for it. It was a big day for us to pick up Distributor of the Year. Largely, I feel, because we've got everybody's, like your organisation, very tuned into the same thing. Let's educate. Let's try and help everybody to get their arms around this incredibly complicated cybersecurity landscape that we've got facing us. And let's harness technology and combine it with human intelligence. I know one of your catchphrases is AI with the HI. So human intelligence and artificial intelligence combined together. So as our listeners know, I like to wrap up the episode with a question. So Eyal, which tech topic has tickled your technology taste buds this year? As a lifetime technologist, since the age of 7, you've been doing this. And it might be something inside your day job, it might be something outside your day job, but what is tickled your taste buds this year, and are you going to delve into it at some point?
So it's a good question. One thing I'm pretty fascinated about, renewable energy, obviously, but hydrogen in specific, I'm following closely, and kind of looking forward for the day that I can drive my car for 2,000 kilometers on a.
We've got some hydrogen buses running, right? Yeah. In London.
So kind of, I'm following closely because, there are some challenges on how to commercialize it and kind of, move to a mass production, but there's some very interesting.
Are you invested in any case, or are you
not invested,
just watching?
I'm just watching when I have some free time.
So you haven't got any stock recommendations for us?
Not yet, but stay tuned.
Thanks so much. Well, everyone, that's a wrap for this episode of Delve. I'm Lance Williams, your host and chief tech enthusiast at cybersecurity specialist distributor Distology. And today we've been joined by Eyal Benishti, the CEO and founder of Ironscales. Now, if you've enjoyed today's podcast, please subscribe, and obviously tell all your friends and family and colleagues to subscribe too, because frankly, I want to go onto LinkedIn and be excitedly shouting at how my subscribers have grown. But thank you for listening, and come back and join us next time when we will delve into our next technology topic. Eyal, thank you very much.
Thank you.